This is the garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video, and that's where we pick from each week. Looks like Steph wrote down 24 for this week. So thank you guys so much for participating. We try to pick ones that are kind of relevant to whatever's going on at that time. I need to go through a few little details about the open garden event that's coming up before we jump into some questions, and a couple other quick things. Number one, the weekly garden planner is $50 off for the rest of this month. And I believe this is the last question and answer video before that ends, because I think the 31st is on like a Saturday of the month. But that $50 discount's good through the 31st of the month. So thank you guys so much for who have purchased the weekly garden planner or are considering it. Again, we've adding content to it as we go, and we have a lot of content. We've been every month we come to, we're looking, trying to figure out what we're missing and then adding to it. You'll continue to get those in the future. Let's see, the open garden. There are a few tickets left, but it's not many, and still, weirdly, all 3 time slots, Friday evening, Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon, still, as I'm filming this, have a few left. I think Saturday morning's almost full. I mean, like really, really close to being full. So there are very few tickets left. If you're still considering it, now would be the time to do that. They're going to be, next week I'll have one more giveaway for the for winners, because there's a lot of things that are being given away, a lot of prizes for folks that are coming to the open garden. In fact, Pro Pluggers sent us 3 Pro Pluggers this week, so each of the Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, there'll be a winner of a Pro Plugger. Soil3 has given us the small bags of compost to give out. Southern Living Plant Collection is sending plants. Encore Azaleas. We have plants that we've dug up here in the garden and divided. What else? There's going to be Plants by Mail gift cards given out. So if you're coming here from a long distance and you can't carry a plant home, potentially you could win a Plants by Mail gift card to get something that way. So there's a lot. And there's a couple winners we've already pulled that will get a free plant when they get here already, and I'm going to do that again next week, so make sure you're watching that. Parking, again, I'm getting emails for questions about the open garden event, so I'm trying to put these details on these Sunday Q&As so folks can know the details. Our street here, Harris Street, the address is 709 Harris Street in Raleigh. Harris Street is a dead-end street. And we would like to reserve the parking on Harris Street for people who need it, who can't walk quite as far. So if you would, there's a church parking near us that you can find on Google Maps, very close, and other parking along the streets everywhere here in our neighborhood. NC State summer school is going on, but they don't tend to park up here in the neighborhood for that. So there's plenty of parking here this time of year in the summertime. This is a bee-friendly, I should have said this several times. This is a very bee-friendly habitat. There will be a lot of bees here. So if you're allergic, make sure you're prepared for that if you need to. We never get stung. I didn't have anybody stung last year. Don't expect anybody to be stung, but there will be bees everywhere in this landscape. And of course, we'll have t-shirts for sale. And that's it. Okay, so that's the open garden information. As you're watching this on Sunday, I'm doing a talk at Mr. Maple on Monday, which is Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day to everyone for their open house. And then I'm speaking at the Plant Symposium here in Raleigh. It's like the 12th or something, 13th of June, something like that, before the open garden event on the 20th. Let's see. I do have consultations available, but I have blocked out a lot of the rest of the year. We have a tremendous amount of things going on the rest of the year. So if you're considering getting a consultation with me sometime between now and the end of this year, there's not a lot of days available. So if you're considering that, you might want to do it sooner than later. And let's see. And that, the consultations are good for really complex questions. There was a question about, from a Tennessee viewer about their landscape being soggy and, having bigger issues than one could answer in a Sunday Q&A video, where you're trying to answer as many questions for as many people as possible. So that might be a consultation may be a better idea. So let's get to some questions. This person says that I've talked about plants wilting from not just a lack of water, but just heat stress in general and from like transplant shock and that kind of thing. Does this mean is the plant's in the wrong place and will it ever be happy? That doesn't mean it's in the wrong place. We have a rhododendron over in the native garden over there, and since it was put in the ground, it wilts every afternoon. But I haven't panicked watered because what happened was I took a plant that was kind of root bound in the container and I broke those roots up some, and then I didn't adjust the top of the plant. It's like I didn't cut anything back off of it. So it still had the same amount on top, but had less roots. Okay, so there's no amount of watering that is going to put that back in balance. It's going to have to grow some new roots in order to put itself back in balance. So I basically I can go over there in the afternoon and it's in a little bit of a wilt, and I can pull those wood chips back and see that it's still moist. So what good would watering actually do to it? It wouldn't do anything. I could potentially put a little water over the top. It does have, it is able to take some water in through its leaves. So I could hose it down a little bit, especially on a hot day, and that evaporative cooling might help it a little bit. But really it's about that plant getting back into balance between what roots it has and the top of the plant. So when I planted it, I could have potentially just pruned it just a bit, and then it probably wouldn't have gone through that. It doesn't necessarily mean you put it in the wrong place, but some plants will go through that. Some plants, you'll plant them and they just hit the ground running and it's like nothing ever happened, and then others will just wilt every afternoon. Those are the plants that people tend to kill over watering because he's just seeing it wilt and it must need water. I don't want to tell you it doesn't need water either, so go check. Okay, pull the mulch back, put your finger down right around the root ball itself. The other thing that can happen is a lot of these plants are grown in just pure pine bark, and that you could have the soil around it wet and that pine bark still kind of dry out in the middle where all the roots currently reside on that plant. So make sure you're checking the actual root ball, that's actually moist. Get down there a couple inches with your finger and make sure. But it doesn't mean you put it in the wrong place. It just means the plant's out of balance in some way, or it's in the wrong place. I mean, obviously that could be the case as well. Okay, if transplanting or planting is a stressor for a plant, again, that was a stressful operation, right? I took 20% of the roots off that plant and did it in middle spring on a 90-degree week. Okay, we're cool right now. I don't think a lot of people around the country are like really cool up in the north, like way cooler than they have, than normal for Memorial Day weekend. But we were 90 degrees there for a week when I was planting some things over there that got stressed. So if transplanting is a stressor for a plant, why not use synthetic fertilizer to get good leaf and root growth and rejuvenate things more quickly? Well, if I throw fertilizer at that, at my wilting problem over there, my stressed rhododendron over there, that would just be like saying, hey, not only do you have to put on some roots right now, not only do you have to get yourself through these hot 90-degree days, but I want you to grow too. And you just throw. It's like taking a small fire and then just throwing gasoline on it, and expecting a good outcome from that. I would be very, very careful not to push plants, especially when you're first putting them in the ground. So there are a lot of questions that come on the channel that include, I dug this giant hole, I got a bag of compost, I put in some cow manure, I fertilized it, I watered it 3 times a day. I'm exaggerating here a bit, but I'll get this laundry list of the way in which this person planted this thing, and then they'll wonder why there's something going wrong with it. And I think they're loving it to death. I mean, it's just 99% of you watching do not need to put $30 worth of material in a planting hole, to plant a plant in your garden. You just don't. And so a lot of those extra things can be the things that cause the problems. So, again, be careful. Get the plant in the ground, give it a minute to settle in. These plants aren't, they're not helpless. They're capable of rooting in, but to put them in the ground and then go, hey, grow immediately, is probably a lot to ask for anything. You know, it's just, you know, be like asking a sick person to go run a marathon, you know, for its own good. You know, for your own health, I would recommend you go run a marathon. It's probably not a good idea. Somebody asked if we have any room for farkleberry in the native garden. They wanted to donate one. Yes, we could definitely, that would be a good plant to add to the native garden over there. Should a small amount of native soil be added to containers for microbes? You can do that. I mean, I could definitely, in this container, have taken some of our native soil from the ground out here and added it, you know, to add some of those micronutrients that might be in the native soil out here, and made those available and have the microbes. You know, it's just, again, these containers aren't the best homes, no matter what we try to do. You know, adding the rock dust that I've talked about, or azomite or native soil, or anything that we try to do, it's still a tough place for beneficial fungi and beneficial bacteria to live, because this container goes through these ups and downs. You know, we mulch this beds out here and leave the leaves in place in these beds out here so that we're looking for consistency. I'm looking for as consistent temperature as I possibly can have in that soil year round. Obviously, it's going to get cold in the winter, it's going to get hot in the summer, but that mulch cap and that consistent moisture out there will keep it from getting super, super hot or super, super cold. And then I'm trying to get consistent moisture, you know, throughout the season. You know, so obviously it's going to be drier at times and wetter at times, but I'm trying to not have those extremes of super, super wet or super, super dry. You know, so what you're trying for is this this moderation, and that moderation of temperature and water and nutrients and all those kinds of things keep the microbes in the best possible condition that they can be in that soil to survive, right? You're giving them the best conditions to survive, to be able to form relationships with the plants that you have in your garden to help them out. In that container, though, when it's hot outside and the sun's hitting the side of that container, it's getting hotter than you'd like for it to be. Obviously, it's above ground, and so in the winter, it's definitely getting colder than anything in the ground. It's going to go through more extremes of dry and wet. You know, when you water it, you're just going to water it and water it and water it and water it until the water runs out the bottom. And when you leave for 2 days on vacation, it's going to get drier than the soil does in your garden, in the ground. So the extremes of the container are going to prevent a lot of those beneficial things, relationships, from happening well. So you know, as much as we'd like to plan to have, you know, these containers take care of themselves as much as the things in the ground do, it's probably never going to work out quite as well. Somebody asked about ID apps for their phone. I use Google Lens a lot of times. It's pretty good. I think it's tied to every photo everybody's ever uploaded on Google to identify that somebody has identified what the photo is, or across as it's scanned websites. You know, if a photo has been labeled, it can match the photo that you're taking to somebody else's labeled that. I think that's probably the way that works. It's pretty accurate, and it'll identify more than plants. It'll do insects and all kinds of things. And then PlantNet is another good one that I've used as well for identifying plants as well. This person was actually trying to identify weeds from plant seedlings. That may be a little tougher when things only have 3-4 leaves on them. You know, to figure those things out. A lot of that's experience and just the way there are various weeds. Once you have identified a few of the weeds that come up in your garden seasonally, then you'll start to notice them in the future and be able to identify them easier. That may be more life experience than the phone is going to be able to solve. Let's see. This person is I wrote this one down just because of the tree video that we recently put it up. They want a native tree for a west-facing house. I guess they're probably going for some sort of shade. The great thing about trees is that we have a lot of native options. I would say I would say that when you go tree shopping, the majority of the trees you'll see are native. When you go shrub shopping, the vast majority of the things you're going to see on the shelves are probably Asian species, just that's probably fairly accurate. There are native shrubs, obviously, but the vast majority of them are Asian. And then when you perennial shop, a lot of those are native too. We have our grasslands in the U.S., in North America, were vast, and there are a lot of great native perennials from that, and trees, forest land. But so there's a ton. There's going to be more tree content. That's the entire purpose of writing that question down. We just put up a video with 50 shade trees. There's our 50 ornamental trees, which are smaller growing. Most of them were flowering in that video, except where there were a couple of Japanese maples. Everything else, I think, were flowering trees, and a lot of them were native. And then there's going to be a shade tree video coming as well. And then the next question, somebody said they enjoyed the tree video. Is there a place in our area that sells some of these specialty trees? Well, the thing is, that nursery that we shot that at was Panther Creek Nursery, which is not that far from us. They're a wholesale-only nursery, but they sell to the garden centers in this area. So, I think a lot of times it's about asking questions at your garden center that you go to. A lot of these, especially certain times of the year, so January is kind of show season. I go to Mance in Baltimore, which is a national nursery show in January that a lot of these garden centers that are in your area probably go to. And then they'll have a state one. So like the first weekend of the year is always Mance. It's like the big national nursery kickoff show. The next couple weekends tend to be more local ones. So the next weekend after that's Green and Growing here in North Carolina, which is the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Show. And then like the third weekend is TPIE, where the tropical plants down in Miami get shown off. And then the fourth weekend is Essen in Germany, which is like the biggest horticulture show on wholesale horticulture show on earth. So a lot of these garden centers have an opportunity to go to these places and see all the nurseries set up and the various places that they can buy things from. So even if they don't stock something at your local garden center, they may in fact know where to get it. So ask questions at these places. Ask them for certain things. It may help them to understand better what they should be stocking. There's interest in plants that they don't even know that there's actual interest in because they've never brought them in. They've never tried them. So that's the main thing I would encourage you to do. If whatever garden center you go to, have a conversation with them. They probably can get things. Sometimes some of these wholesale nurseries have like a $5,000 minimum order or whatever it is for shipping. And they may not be meeting that in order to place an order with them. So you may help them to be able to get an order from that place. Okay, the next question. Somebody said, will a blowtorch work on killing stilt grass? Yeah, so Japanese stilt grass has become an awful problem here in Raleigh and a lot of places around the country. It is obviously not a native, but it tends to grow in moist areas. The deer don't eat it, which is super problematic. If the deer ate it, it'd probably be under control somewhat, as many deer as we have, but the deer do, I think, take the seed and move it about. And so we have a little bit growing over here in between this garden and the native garden over there. I'm hoping to eliminate it pretty quickly over there, but a blowtorch will kill it. I mean, any chemical, it's a funny plant because like glyphosate or, the old Roundup, if it looks at it, it dies. But the problem is it builds such a seed bank. It seeds itself so much that those seeds just keep coming back. So you're in this cycle. You either need to change the conditions of that space, meaning get more sunlight in it potentially, because it tends to grow better in the shade. Make it drain better because it does like more consistently moist soil. So that can be change of conditions that would help. This person asked if they could use Preen. I don't use any pre-emergent herbicide, but that may be a possibility for me if I had a bad situation with Japanese stilt grass, is to try to prevent those seed or kill those seed as they germinate. May in fact be the way to go. Again, I don't recommend a lot of chemicals on here, but Japanese stilt grass is a special kind of evil, we'll call it, because it comes up in areas that we have some great native woodland plants, and it just smothers them. If it takes over a space, it just completely takes it over. So it can be really hard to garden with. I would probably up the ante on spraying and pruning, changing, and again, regrading it, changing something about that space to get rid of it. But that one's definitely not fun. Would I be inclined to plant a Natchez crepe myrtle at this point with all the scale issues? I have one crepe myrtle in this garden. There was a comment made on it when Steph talked about it in the video. We've had it for a couple years in the container just because it has black foliage. You know, the scale issues here in Raleigh looked much worse initially, like 2 years ago. It looked like it was just going to kill the trees, and some of the weaker ones, some of the crepe myrtles that were planted in really bad conditions, you know, in the city plantings, you know, really took it tough. I mean, really looked terrible. But I've noticed over like the past year, I see scale on most of the crepe myrtles in the city, but it's much more minor. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if some insect is helping, or birds are helping, or something is helping, or the trees that are just in a healthier condition get it, but are less, you know, have less problems from it. So I don't know what's going on there, but it seemed like it was like a jet taking off, but now it's kind of seems like it's not as big of a deal as it was going to be initially. Again, though, if the plant's under stress, it flat out kills them. There's a few dead ones around the city right now but they were planted in little boxes in sidewalks and, you know, not places where the tree would have been happy in the first place. So, you know, I don't know about, we did that video with the 50 ornamental trees, and I could have done 100, obviously. There's many more great ornamental trees that I got to 50 and put up a video. I could have done 100 and still been excited, you know, through 100. There's so many great low-growing ornamental trees. I only included one crepe myrtle in that on purpose because this city has enough crepe myrtles. Just in general, I tend not to want to plant the thing that's everywhere. So if you were looking at a Natchez crepe myrtle, maybe look at that 50 ornamental tree video and find something. You know, this Tokyo Tower Kyananthus back here is beautiful. I mean, it's just, that tree is just perfection back there. And it's not a tree, there may not be another one in this neighborhood. You know, and I kind of like that. But it's pretty available. So maybe I might look for something else, not because of the scale issue, but just because of the overdoneness of, you know, there's virtually not a lot in this neighborhood that doesn't have a crepe myrtle in it, including this one. Should you prune out dead twigs in shrubs, loropetalum, boxwoods, hollies, azaleas? Yeah, if you want to at this point. If you've identified the fact that a branch is definitely dead at this point, you can prune them out if you want to. I tend not to get into that much detail unless there's some big brown branch on something that's obviously standing out from the rest of the plant. I might get in there and cut that out. But just in general, I'm sure there's dead or branches in this shrub or that shrub, small stuff that I'm not going to worry about, because this time of year they're flushing out and kind of covering that stuff up. So it just depends on how bad it looks as to whether I would. But yeah, at this point, I think you would probably know what's dead and alive in a plant. Okay, I get another gypsum question here. So I advise against using gypsum to break down clay. I don't advise against using gypsum. I am telling you, anyone who tells you to use gypsum to break down clay but doesn't tell you to get a soil test done, or some advice other than I was told by the owner of the store to sell people gypsum when they say that they have clay soil. You know, that's my thing, is I'm not saying that there's no case that you would never use gypsum. I'm just telling you, anyone who's selling you something that alters your soil just based on, hey, I heard gypsum breaks down clay, is not giving you good advice. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say here. Anything that you see on your phone where somebody's telling you that, you know, adding this to your garden soil will do this or that, without also saying, hey, you should get a soil test done, is not giving you information that is actual, that's good information. You know, the internet is just so broken in that way. And even pre-internet, you know, I got a job at a garden center in North Raleigh as a kid, and I was told to sell people gypsum for breaking down clay soil. And then I left that job, went and got a job doing organic lawn care, and then really went down the rabbit hole of soil science and went, hold on, it has a lot of other consequences. You know, gypsum has a lot of other consequences can happen outside of the fact that, yes, it does in fact break down clay. It also leaches nutrients, could potentially leach other nutrients from your soil. So it's like, why would you just generally recommend something like that? Well, you wouldn't unless you're just trying to sell somebody something, you know, or something, you know, you heard it from somebody else, kind of a thing. So that's what I'm talking about. Just make sure, you know, before you do anything to change the soil chemistry in your garden, that you have a firm understanding of it based on a soil test and based on good information from somebody. And then they were adding Osmocote. This is another one of those where they're adding a lot of things. They've got clay soil, and they're in a hurry to get it broken down as quick as possible. So, you know, they want to add maybe perlite or permatil or expanded shell or vermiculite or whatever to the soil is to do it as quick as possible. And then basically finished with, is this a long process? Yeah, it probably is a long process. I will say, I talk about this being a clay-based soil all the time, but this house was built in the 40s, and it was under turf the entire time, or weedy grass. So it was just mowed. You think about this, was mowed over and over and over again. So that material from cutting that grass had actually had a positive impact out here. Besides, it wasn't, you know, some ornamental garden, but it was grass rooting down in it, so putting roots down into that clay, and then the material being chopped off of it was putting a humus layer up on top of it, which was beneficial as well to this soil. So this soil, you know, again, despite being a clay-based soil, was not in terrible shape, okay? It had been worked on accidentally for 80 years with plants rooting down deep into it, right? And roots running from other things had been breaking it up. So this didn't take as long. You know, we put the wood chips down and really just almost immediately it got better. My old house was more of what I think most people would run into, where the space for the house and where the main garden was had been scraped with a machine and the house built, and then just really all the topsoil was gone, all the humus was gone, anything that was beneficial in that, you know, what was the woods. I mean, my neighborhood was called Pleasant Woods. They had damaged that soil in a way, compacted it, and exposed just that clay layer that was below it. So that took me 20 some years to really change that soil in a big way. If I could have backed up, I would have put the wood chips down at the beginning of that. I just didn't. I was a 20-some-year-old kid when I bought that house. I didn't know anything about wood chips. Despite having been in this business for a long time at that point. So if I could have backed up in time, I would have used the wood chip method on that, and that would have sped things up. Okay, but I think that's the only really effective way to speed things up. If you take advice on using chemistry to change your soil in some way, gypsum, or you till a bunch of stuff deep down in it, you do anything that changes it like that, you could have some sort of negative consequence. So I think you're best to do the top-down thing overall, even though, yes, to answer your question, it can be a long process. But if you do something to your soil, you can't take it out later. So that's the issue. If you put something in there, it's there. If you've gone too far with something, you're going to have additional issues. Okay, this person has 3 green giant arborvitaes doing well in zone 7A. They have 3 hydrangea paniculatas planted in front of them, right up against the base of them. Should they move them? Will they have a negative impact on the green giant arborvitaes? Anything leaning against your conifers can damage them or thin them for sure. We talk about that in this garden. But most of what we have are like dwarf conifers, small little blue spruce and little dwarf cryptomerias and things like that, that are, you know, your green giant arborvitae are more likely just to run over your hydrangeas as they grow and probably not have as much of a problem with them. But, you know, these green giant arbs are going to get 70 feet tall and, you know, 18 feet wide eventually. So at some point you're going to move those hydrangeas, and if you're moving them, it's probably best to do it when they're dormant in the winter. Although hydrangea paniculata is a much tougher plant than other hydrangeas. So if you wanted to pop them out of the ground now, especially while it's still cool outside, you could cut them back about a third and they'd still have time to come out of that and probably bloom later in the season if you wanted to get it over with now. But winter would be the best time to move them. But you're ultimately going to have to move them or they're going to get eaten. The green giants are more likely to damage them than the other way around. Can emerald arborvitae be shaped or pruned, topped off when in zone 8A Georgia? Yeah, we saw them up in the Northeast and up into Canada where people hedged them off 6 or 8 feet tall. They create walls out of them and just continue to top them out. Your issue here though in zone 8A in Georgia, you know, I would do it in the late winter is probably the best time to do it. They're not happy in zone 8A in Georgia. If you look at the native, you know, Thuja occidentalis is native to North America, north of Pennsylvania. There's a little bit in the highest mountains in Appalachia, but the main area where these plants are native, and Steph and I have seen them in their native range up there, is literally north of Pennsylvania. So if you've got them in zone 8A in Georgia, they're already under stress. So keep that in mind. You're going to want to do things at the best time when things are under stress. So I would do that in the winter only. But yeah, they can be shaped. Make sure if you have emerald arborvitae in the south, and there are millions, there are probably 1,000 in this neighborhood without an exaggeration. You know, a lot of them are under stress or dying. That's a plant that you have to water no matter how long they've been in the ground. If you go a 6 or 8 week period during the summertime, that's a plant that needs water. Okay. Somebody planted a dogwood. Okay, get a lot of questions like this. Somebody planted a dogwood last year that barely flowered this year. Does it need time, or is it weak and should they get rid of it? No, absolutely not. If you planted something, again, that rhododendron that's over there, I would not expect it to bloom well next year. It's going through this weird stress, and rhododendrons set their flower buds during the summer for the following year. So how good a shape is that thing actually going to be in when it gets around to the time to be setting flower buds for next year? In fact, I'd probably be best to cut them off if I was, protecting the plant investing in the plant long term, right? But I would think this person was in Connecticut. I think he probably also had a dry weather issue. We were up there in the fall when we went up and saw all the emerald arborvitae up in Canada, or Thuja occidentalis up in Canada. It was super, super dry up there. I mean, we had a dry fall here, but it was exceptionally dry in the Northeast. I mean, really, really, really dry. And so I would imagine it just hasn't been happy since it went in the ground. But you can't judge anything on a plant in the first year it's in the ground. It's really hard, I know, to spend that kind of money and invest that kind of time and, have a Saturday that feels like it tried to kill you. One of 2 days off, to install them, and then them not perform, at the absolute peak of your expectation. But, some things hit the ground and just do great, and others take a year, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. We used to say, the first year it weeps, the second year it sleeps, the third year it leaps. Most of that was based on field-grown material where people dug stuff out of the ground and then moved it to a house. Container material can hit the ground just absolutely running and without any problems sometimes. Other times it can go through that first year it weeps, second year it sleeps, third year it leaps thing that historically has been said about planting plants. Let's see. What should you use to clean tools when pruning multiple plants? You can use any kind of alcohol on it. I think probably any kind of detergent would probably work, just to, you know, clean anything off of them that's on them. But if you want to actually kill pathogens, you need to use some sort of small amount of alcohol in that. How do you keep them from rusting? I kind of don't. Some of my stuff has a little rust on them. When, you know, you can spray some WD-40 on them or something like that if you're storing them through the winter. You know, maybe that would help, and then clean that off before you start, or wipe most of that off before you start using them again. That would be helpful, but most of mine tools have some sort of small amount of rust on them. But I keep them sharp enough and keep them in pretty good shape. But I've been talking about, that question came from me talking about one of the main ways that pathogens get spread is having a landscaper come in and do your, you know, some of your pruning. I hope that, you know, landscapers, you know, clean some of their tools between going from place to place to place to place. But if you know, I would imagine most of the rose rosette that has spread in this neighborhood is being spread, you know, not just by an aerified mite. It's a mite that causes the issue, you know, and it's an aerified mite, meaning it goes up in the air, lands on the next rose, does its thing there, and, you know, keeps going. The mite is not the actual issue. It's the pathogen that it's carrying from one plant to another. It's just taking it out of one plant and putting it into another. It can also be spread by pruners as well. So I would imagine just almost equal number are being killed by the pruners going from one plant to the next as there are from the mite itself. Somebody asked my thoughts on mukkadenia. They were expensive, so they want to make them happy, cultural requirements. They have a shady landscape with a large rock and rain garden. Well, that's kind of the perfect place for it. That's like a Korean native member of a family of plants that tends to be stoloniferous, you know, spreads by underground stolons, like strawberry begonias in the same family. There are some in that family that are North American natives, but a lot of them are Asian natives. So if you have a moist part shade or shade space, that's kind of the perfect place for that plant. It tends to be a little more clumping than strawberry begonias overall, but has similar flower spike on it. Probably an underused plant overall, because it won't, you know, tends to not be maybe quite as aggressive in our shady spaces. Let's see. Somebody's gardenia is yellow for 2+ years, the whole thing. So when we see gardenias yellow, if it was out, like if you had a really high pH soil and you could see the mid veins in the leaves, sometimes that can be an iron deficiency that some of our plants that would like acid soils will get. More often than not, when I see that fully yellow gardenia, it's just not happy in the place that it's in. I would absolutely replant that plant. It's in, let's see, it's in full sun in Central Florida, and in 3 hours of winter sun. I think you may, in fact, have it in too much sun potentially. I think the further south you go, the more your gardenia would probably appreciate a little bit of shade. Not full shade, but a little bit more shade as you go further south. So it could be that the roots on that thing are just getting really super, super hot during the day. So it has, you know, when you see that yellowing up in the top of the plant, you know it's some sort of nutrient deficiency. Well, how did it end up with that nutrient deficiency? Again, if you see the strong mid vein where you see the red, the dark green mid, you know, the veins of the leaf, typically that's an iron deficiency. Other deficiencies may show up as all kinds of different things. But what's creating that deficiency? Are you overwatering it? Because that would cause the plant to have a hard time, or underwatering it, having a hard time bringing those nutrients up into the top of the plant. Is the soil too hot? Is the plant stressed in some way that's not allowing it to get access to the nutrients it needs to photosynthesize properly, make sugars, and do all the things that it's trying to do to survive? So something's going on. Something in that process is damaged. So I don't know. You tell me your plant's yellow, I can tell you it's underwatered, overwatered, it's too much sun, it's too much shade, it's too much. I mean, I can't really answer the question without telling you. What I can tell you is the plant has some sort of stress that's causing it to not be able to bring up basic phosphorus or potassium or boron or whatever the heck it needs to make that system work properly. So for me, if a plant has struggled for 2 years in the spot, I'm either going to replant it in the same space. I assume I planted it too deep or something, it's not happy. Or I'm going to try to find a new location for it. Probably finding a new location for it would be advisable. That's what I would throw out on that. Let's see, number 19. This person has had 9 tons of rocks removed, 9 tons of rocks removed and replaced with sandy loam topsoil. Plants are now struggling in the sand, how to build up the sand. They topped it with compost, but it started eroding. So yeah, I mean, obviously if you have some sort of erosion issue, you need to be using a mulch on top. So if you wanted to compost it, you definitely have to put some sort of cap on top of that. You might want to, since this is all new, you know, sometimes I say tilling is killing, but since this is an all new situation, I might till that compost down in the soil just a little bit, not 8 inches deep, but, you know, just take an electric tiller or whatever and just, you know, compost it and just till that into that top couple of inches and then put a hardwood mulch cap on top of it to stop that erosion, and maybe that will help. I am, as much as possible, not wanting to bring in foreign soil from other places. And I mentioned that last week. Just moving plants around scares me with jumping worms. Also, beyond that, just bringing in weed seeds. You know, a lot of the sandy soil that comes in tends to have nut sedge in it, which, you know, once you get nut sedge, we have nut sedge in our vegetable garden over there, and it's just an endless battle trying to control, decapitate it. It keeps, you know, it's a hard one to control. So as much as possible, I don't want to bring those things in. Now that you have, I would till a little compost down in it, put a cap on it so it stops eroding as quick as possible. So somebody had just said, what makes shade situations dry? Is it just large trees? Yeah, most of the time. Of course, it could be slope. As well can determine it, or it could be compaction. You know, a lot of times, you know, if we've put a lot of foot traffic in spaces, or, you know, initially the soil was compact, or topsoil has eroded away and it's just trees growing on subsoil basically, then it can end up dry as well. So it's just, you know, with your dry there are definitely shade plants for dry shade and shade plants for moist, more consistently moist shade conditions. I've talked about that a lot. But my dry shade space back there, I'm also working on it too. I'm planting things for dry shade, but I'm also working on it by mulching it and by, you know, keeping it watered occasionally, allowing those plants back there to get rooted in. I'm slowly but surely converting that from a dry shade area to a slightly more moist shade area. It will never be moist back there because the trees will always be in charge, but continue to work on those dry shade areas, even beyond putting plants in there that will adapt to it. Continue to work on that soil, keep it mulched, keep it consistently moist when you can, water it, maybe overhead water it occasionally when it's abnormally dry, and give the plants that you're planting in there an opportunity, and the mulch that you're putting back there an opportunity to improve that soil over time. Do we ever propagate what we prune off? So there's a pruning video that went up as you're watching this, I think while I'm filming this. On Friday, there was a pruning video, possibly another one. On Saturday or Monday, there'll be another pruning video as well for the front garden. Yes, we root, I mean, I have a lot of propagation videos on this channel, and I rooted literally millions of plants in my life. A lot of the things in this garden, you know, not really, but I have all kinds of, I've shown lots of ways to propagate things on this channel if you want to learn plant propagation. Propagating things right on the plant, propagating things off the plant, propagating things in small houses. Lots of propagation stuff on here. Somebody had just thrown out to what is hybrid vigor attributed. So I've talked about that feather falls carex as an example of this, where basically it's an interspecies hybrid of different carex put together, and the two of them are greater than the individuals were. That Golden Falls Redbud is a perfect example of this. That thing I pruned it 3 feet off the ground, but in the wintertime, it leafed out and immediately was back on the ground again. So we pruned it again the other day in the pruning video that you will have seen on Friday. It got pruned up again. That thing just has hybrid vigor. So a lot of times when we take two different species, so if you take, in this case, a Texas redbud and a Eastern redbud, and you put them together, sometimes you get something that's greater than each of them individually, okay? And you get what we would call hybrid vigor between the two of them. Sometimes you can get less than. I mean, the goal is, if you were mixing a Texas redbud with an Eastern redbud, what would be the purpose of that? Well, the Texas redbud is probably more drought tolerant, probably more just in general up for a wider range of temperatures and a wider range of drought tolerance, ebbs and flows in water. And the Eastern redbud may be a better flowering tree overall, or it's the color of the flower that we're looking for. And we're combining those two together, hoping to get the drought tolerance and the toughness of the Texas redbud or the Oklahoma redbud with the floriferousness, people love that word, with lots of flowers of the Eastern redbud, or the shape of the leaf, or the color of the leaf, maybe if we're combining two with that have foliage color as well. And sometimes the result of that, especially initially in the, as someone said in the comments, F1 hybrids, when our initial crosses can lead to 1 + 1 = 3. And you just get this crazy hybrid vigor in it too, where the plant just grows much faster, much fuller, much quicker than each individual did. It can also go the other way. You can take two really good plants and put them together and get something that just languishes and doesn't do anything. Or you end up with the opposite of, it doesn't flower very well and it doesn't hold up in the drought very well. We ruined two perfectly good trees, in this particular cross. So it can go either way, but sometimes it shows up. I was talking to the breeder of that carex over there last year, and right away, as you're doing these crosses, they're crossing a bunch, they're doing maybe 50,000 seedlings or something, and then one just goes, much faster than everything else. So you know pretty quick which ones are going to have that hybrid vigor. Okay, let's see. So somebody has a bunch of some bagged soil, and it got swamped by too much rain. It has become anaerobic. Can it still be used? What I would recommend is you take it out of the bags, maybe put it on the driveway or something and let it dry out and then use it. So you need to kill the bad bacteria that's in it. So if you open a bag of something that smells really funky, you can still possibly use it, but I would I'd dump it out on the driveway or a sidewalk or something like that, let it dry out for a few days. That should be enough to kill most of that bad stuff, and then you can use it, is a way I would handle that. I have a couple more here, but again, the weekly garden planner is $50 off for the next 6 days. As you're watching this, I did the open garden information at the beginning of the video. Look forward to seeing everybody, and again, there's not many tickets left, especially for Saturday morning, I think. And then 2 more questions here. Somebody has some green giant arborvitae that thinned since they planted them in October. They had a bit of tip dieback. It has been well taken care of with plenty of room and a mixed border. They're planted high from the clay. They've had rain mulch, but it is thinning. Again, things hit the ground and for different reasons, and they don't always go exactly like we want them. Give them time, okay? That's the thing at this point. If you have a thin conifer or you have something has gone wrong in a plant that you planted last year, I think our tendency is to go, man, I need to give it more of this or more of that, or I need to do more. As long as it's got consistent moisture, and again, that's checking it, not watering it because it's Tuesday or whatever day you water, but checking it, watering it if it needs water, and then just kind of leave it alone and let it figure it out. Once it starts to put on some growth, if you want to do a little bit of shearing on it to help fill them in a little bit, I would do that, but I wouldn't do that before it tells you it's made the adjustment into the ground. So a lot of times, and this is easier said than done sometimes, because we all, you know, look at something and then get nervous about it and then want to do something about it. But the main thing is watch it, but don't do anything other than water it until it has some new growth. Once it has some new growth on it, you can go, okay, I think it's settled in, I think it's going to be okay. And then you can shear it and maybe work on it a little bit at that point. So somebody says, what makes you give up on a plant? So that would be a good transition from that last one. You know, I generally, in consultations especially, I'll talk about, you know, I give things, if something, I can always tell when a plant's shrub's over 20 years old. You can send me a photo tomorrow of your garden and I can tell you about how old the shrubs are, because I've done this for so long. You know, once shrubs go past 20, especially 25 years, they really look a little tired a lot of times. Our smaller growing shrubs that we're trying to maintain on our foundations. For me, almost always those are tear outs, because I just know that even regenerative pruning on them is not going to really solve it. It might buy me a couple of years where they look pretty good, but the root systems on them are so big that they come back faster and faster and faster from those prunings, and become kind of annoying in the long term, and get really woody and don't look all that great. So for me, what makes me give up on a shrub, two things. If there's a shrub in this garden that's taking 80% of my time and energy and thoughts, I'm probably erasing that thing unless it has some sort of sentimental value to me in some way. I don't want one plant to, this is nearly 400 plants in this garden now with that native garden over there. If one of them's causing me lots of problems, it's gone just because it's annoying. Unless it has some sort of sentimental value that I want to keep it. The other thing would be, if I've tried something in a couple places, or I've tried the regenerative pruning where I've pruned it back hard to see what it would do, if it comes back out of that a second time and it just still not making me happy, or it's not performing the way it should, it's gone. That's kind of the way the process that I take with that. I give it one chance, cut it back hard, and then it's out. So there you go. Thank you guys so much. Again, ask gardening questions in the comment section below the video, and we pick from those each week. Again, you guys continue to ask great questions. Despite the fact that I do this literally every Sunday, you do come up with new questions every week. So thank you for that.